It is your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand, happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody is having a great day out there today. Terrific show coming up to finish off the week. Jon Marthaler joins me to talk Minnesota United soccer, a segment that somehow got into not just the off-season dealings of Minnesota United, but also got into a lot of Van Halen and their various lead singers over the years. Yeah, I don't know exactly how we got there. I blame Jon, but the whole thing is entertaining, and you'll want to stick around for that here in just a few minutes. Kevin O'Connell is the NFL Coach of the Year. Jared Allen is a Pro Football Hall of Famer. We will get to that here in a little while later in the show, as well as look at the Gophers women's basketball team. Another loss for them, this time at the hands of Iowa. Wolves in just a minute here, but first, what did I miss? Wild snap a 2-game losing streak, stop a 2-game goalless streak. They beat the Carolina Hurricanes 2-1 on Thursday at XL Energy Center. I was there with a bunch of friends. We went. Some friends in town, Carolina Hurricanes fans. Let me just say this. Two things about this. One, if you have the occasion to go to a game that maybe isn't promising to be the most scintillating or spicy contest, Wild versus Hurricanes, two good teams, sure, in the standings, but two teams from different conferences, a 6:30 start on a weeknight. He got to XL Energy Center. The building was not exactly buzzing. Let me just say that. The building was not exactly buzzing at 6:25 p.m. It got better at moments, but it was not exactly buzzing for the vast majority of the game. But if you find yourself in that situation, attending the game with someone who roots for the opposing team, the road team, does add a large element of liveliness to it. You should definitely aspire to go to games with someone who has a rooting interest on the other side, because then even if there's just minor moments, you are going to have some good-natured, hopefully, back and forth. Now, along those lines, the friend in question was my friend Keith, who's been a Carolina Hurricanes fan for quite some time. I have known Keith for over 35 years. We go way back. We've been friends for a very, very, very long time. We don't have a ton of sports rivalries since we tend to usually watch and follow the same teams. A big addendum to that would be the 1991 World Series, back when I was a huge Atlanta Braves fan. He was a Minnesota Twins fan, and he, unfortunately for me, got the better of that World Series. But usually if we're at a game, we are on the same side. But in this case, even though I don't have a rooting interest in the Minnesota Wild, you're at a home game. You're going to watch. You're going to watch through a different lens, and I'm certainly not a Carolina Hurricanes fan. So we're kind of going back and forth. There's moments. Wild get the first goal. Do a little bit of fake taunting to them. This and that, the other thing. But so it comes to the second period. Carolina gets awarded a penalty shot for what from our seats looked like maybe a questionable call. Upon review, maybe a penalty shot was worthy. I wasn't even sure if it was worth a penalty, but it looked like Brock Faber put a pretty good bear hug on his guy. So there you go. Penalty shot awarded. Jackson Blake goes in. Minnesota native Jackson Blake goes in. Misses on the penalty shot. So we were going back and forth on whether it should have been a penalty shot, whether there was a worthy attempt on goal, things like that. We're like kind of laughingly kind of taunting each other. We're not sitting right next to each other. We're a big group. We got like 4 in one row and 3 right below us. And, but we're having fun. We're not hopefully not terribly obnoxious. We have not been drinking at all. We are just having a good time taunting each other like friends who have been friends for 35 years. So this happens for a while. And, we're not even exceptionally loud. We're like we have been, back in the day when we were like maybe late teens, early 20s, we were much worse at sporting events. This was like 1/10 maybe of what we had been in the past before we were mature adults. But one of the other fans next to me, the woman sitting next to me who is not part of our group, leans over to me and she says, hey, the usher has asked me twice if everything's okay between you guys. I'm like, what? She asked if everything is okay between us? Like we were really fighting? Like, did it really seem like we were fighting? We definitely were not fighting. This was like the funniest of like the faux back and forth you could imagine. But apparently to an outsider who saw someone sitting in the Carolina Hurricanes jersey, that was him, it looked like we were legitimately having a beef over this penalty shot. So from that point forward, we had to tone it down a little bit just to not run afoul of the usher. But it is endlessly amusing to me that was the reaction of someone who was there. I had to explain to the person next to me, like, oh my gosh, no, we're friends. This is just kind of like how we roll. We're literally just having fun. There's no contention here. There's no malice in any of our actions or words. We were not swearing. So I think maybe there was a bit of an overreaction on their part, but then again, I've never really watched from the outside how he and I interact when there's a sporting event going on. Maybe it did look like we were fighting. Maybe it did look like we were really at each other's throats. I just don't think so. In any event, the Wild went on to win 2-1, got an important victory. Philip Gustafsson was terrific in net. Carolina didn't score until late in the game. Spoiled his shutout with a little under 3 minutes left, but the Wild held on, got the 2-1 win, much needed points in the standings. So everybody had a good time. So I guess I would say we didn't get kicked out of the game. We never deserved to get kicked out of the game again. We were not that bad, at least from my perspective. We were just having fun, friends taunting each other, not even that loud. But anyway, Wild got the win. We didn't get kicked out, so all is well that ends well. Now, a few of us were simultaneously keeping tabs on the Wolves game as the Wild are playing. Wolves playing across town at Target Center. Second night of a back-to-back after they beat the Bulls on Wednesday. Rockets were leading by a little bit for most of the game. Took a 6-point lead at the end of the third quarter. So Wolves are playing. Wild game ends. The Wild game was a 6:30 start, so the Wolves game's got maybe half a quarter left when the Wild game is over. When we're filtering out, walking down West 7th Street to my car. We see the game on the big screen in one of the establishments. A couple of us pop in just to watch the end of the game. Ant is going crazy. He finishes with 41 points. Second straight game with 40 plus after he had 49 against the Bulls. Wolves end up winning 127-114. Gets lopsided in the end, even though that thing was close for almost the whole way. And here's where it gets interesting, right? The trade deadline came and passed. Bunch of teams in the West did a bunch of stuff, as I detailed on Thursday's show. Wild didn't do anything, stood pat. No, I'm sorry, the Wolves didn't do anything, stood pat. Didn't have a ton of maneuverability, draft picks, and they're kind of counting on this roster to get back to better health. They think they're playing better lately, despite kind of that hiccup where they lost to Washington and Sacramento earlier this week at home. So they stand pat. So that I feel like that made Thursday's game important, right? They beat the Bulls the other night. Maybe it wasn't their crispest performance because the Bulls put it on them pretty good for part of that first half, but they got the win. It became comfortable at the end. But then you got a back-to-back against Houston, a team that you're looking up at somewhat surprisingly in the standings. Rockets come in having lost 4 in a row, but they're still above you in the standings, still having a surprisingly very good season. So they come in, they're kind of taking it to you for a while. You got tired legs, you're playing the second night of a back-to-back, but you find enough to get it over the hump. You get your superstar to carry you to the victory down the stretch. He's going to the basket a ton lately, getting fouled like crazy, getting to the line, making his free throws, Anthony Edwards. Mike Conley Jr. has been much better as of late, looking more like the Mike Conley Jr. of old. That is a great sign for them, especially with Dante DiVincenzo out. Getting contributions from a lot of guys that weren't playing any meaningful minutes as of a couple weeks ago. Guys like Jalen Clark, of course. I think he had 17 last night. You had, Luka Garza had a cup of coffee in this game. He hasn't been all that great the last few, but he's been giving them some minutes. Obviously, Rob Dillingham's been giving them some more minutes. Terrence Shannon Jr. got some action, got some meaningful run in this game with Jaden McDaniels in foul trouble. He he looked like he belonged. He fit the part. So a lot of good signs, but the best sign, the thing you've got to have this time of year is wins. They got that. So now they're 29-23, 6th place in the West. The Clippers lost. So the Wolves, I think, are half game up for 6th in the West. And keep this filed away. They do have the tiebreaker advantage over the Clippers if it becomes a factor at the end of the season. Still a long way to go. 30 games left for the Wolves. So not going to say that's going to be a factor. You don't know how the standings are going to shake out. But as of right now, 6th place in the West. Only 3 games behind the Rockets now, which also should be of interest to everybody because the Rockets seem to be fading here a little bit. They've lost 5 in a row now. They are not in great shape right now. They were doing a bunch of bickering after the game. Dylan Brooks got called out by Anthony Edwards. A bunch of Rockets players were unhappy with the way that game finished. Reading a story in the Houston Chronicle. So a lot to not like from the Rockets standpoint. That makes them vulnerable. The Wolves, if the Wolves are going to chase anybody else down, Houston seems like a good candidate for that. Houston, not a lot of playoff experience, not a lot of pedigree right there. So that's a team that maybe they could chase down. But the Wolves, on a day when the trade deadline passes, they don't do anything. They get a win over a conference opponent above them. Anthony Edwards goes for big time points. A big night for Minnesota sports. Both those teams win, and we'll see where it takes them from here. Let's talk never-ending MLS soccer with Jon Marthaler. John, how are you doing?
Not too bad. The off season's almost 3 days long at this point, and the next game's coming up already.
It's unbelievable. We talk about the NFL having dominance over the news cycles. We talk about how long the baseball season is, but nobody drags things out quite like Major League Soccer. They're the whole season.
The NFL has found ways to, they create other events to make the offseason seem shorter, and so does baseball. And soccer has just solved that problem by never stopping playing.
No, they just don't
going to
stop.
Continuously play soccer.
Is January? Did they play in December? Is January the only month where there was no MLS games, or was there also? Yeah,
I think that's right because the MLS Cup was the first weekend in December, and the regular season starts the last weekend of February. So
that's amazing. So January is their only true month without a regular season match or season or playoff match. That's unbelievable.
And I'll just remind you, they're talking about flipping the calendar so that they can play during the wintertime.
Why not? Let's do it. Why not? We'll just take July off.
Play all summer.
Go right back to it. Just play all summer. Get into the good weather. Get into the good stuff. But it's been, I would say, a fairly lively off season for the Loons. I apologize. I don't have any 90s pop to which to compare the Hassani Dotson trade request as opposed to the.
What if we compare him to David Lee Roth?
Oh, yeah?
No,
you want to?
I don't think it's nothing. I'm just trying to think of any famous musical group that had somebody who maybe wanted out, but then he came back and maybe doesn't want out. I'm not. I don't know what else to do there. David Lee Roth, because I'm an old man, was the first one that came to my mind.
Well, so I'm confused. So Hassani Dotson basically issued a statement saying he wants to be traded. But then the Loons bosses are like, I don't really think it was Hassani Dotson who said that. Like, what is the? Where are we at with that?
That was sort of the strong hint that they gave was, well, the statement said that Hassani Dotson's requesting a trade, but we don't think that was Hassani that was putting that statement out, which I suppose implies that it was his agent or his camp that was putting that out. But
yeah.
Whether it's trying to generate interest or just, create fire where there's smoke, it's not uncommon for that sort of thing to happen in soccer or really any sports. I don't think soccer is unique from other sports in that, but certainly I've been at training and there's no sign that players are ostracizing him or he's, not working hard or wearing flip-flops to practice or anything like that. He's running hard and working hard and as if he's part of the team. So I guess we'll see what happens with that one.
So, he's there, he's training. I mean, do we imagine this is just about contract, right? He wants a different contract.
Yeah. I the funny thing about MLS contracts is we're not talking about he wants Sam Darnold money and he's whether they're going to franchise tag him and only pay him $35 million or whatever. but I'm sure he does want more money than what they're offering. And I think Minnesota's probably holding somewhat firm and saying, well, this is what we can do. This is what we can't do. So I guess we'll see what the result of that is. I don't have any particular insight into what he's asking for or what he wants, except I'm guessing it's more, or otherwise you would have signed a contract. So
if they did decide to trade him, would they have if they dealt their David Lee Roth, do they have enough Sammy Hagars to complete a Van Halen?
Well, they're bringing in more Sammy Hagars. By the end of last season, they did seem like their central midfield in particular is a little bit light, and they're sort of moving to shore that up a little bit. They signed a guy from the Korean League named Ho-Yeon Jong, who has he's basically this week into training with him, and then he has to go get his visa and stuff. So he didn't train today. I assume that was visa related, that he just can't do a lot of work before they get the visa sorted out. So it's a little bit difficult because they've got guys that are coming in. There's Jung and there's Nicolas Romero, and there's heavily hinted at, heavily rumored that they're going to sign another guy from France. But trying to get all these guys in and get them not only up to speed, but get visas and stuff. The season is coming up soon. The season starts in, I guess, 16 days. So yeah, just because of the way, like we said, that there's no off season, it's kind of hard to get these deals done and across the line and ready to go by the time the season starts. So they are trying to shore up the midfield a little bit, and I think they'll have some other options if Asani Dotson does depart.
You don't want it to descend into, if we may continue the tortured Van Halen metaphor that you started
this already.
You, in case you've forgotten, they also went to a third lead singer at a certain point. Gary Cherone of Extreme became the Van Halen lead singer for a time. Not really a popular move with Van Halen fans. He eventually left the group again. Now the Wikipedia page has a post Van Halen section for Gary Cherone, but that's not a spot where you want to be messing around. That's not exactly a position where you want to be messing around or dealing away your strength.
You want a David Lee Roth, you can handle the Sammy Hagar, but getting a Gary Cherone is nobody's idea of a good idea.
Yeah. So there's that. They've been quite active in other areas. I mean, basically reading what you've written, seeing other things. I mean, it looks like they are trying to get younger and achieving some of that goal already this offseason.
Yeah, I give them credit in the sense that when the new regime came in at the start of last year, you looked at the roster and you looked at the number of designated players they had, and I at least looked at it and thought, well, it's not quite a Bill Guerin situation, but it feels a little bit like a Bill Guerin situation in terms of how are they going to clean this up and get these guys off the roster and get younger. I know they want to get younger and everybody wants to get younger, but how are they going to do this? And we're a season later, and they've given themselves pretty much all the flexibility they could possibly need in terms of contracts and bringing in young players. They got a lot of guys who are 24, 25 or under, rather than previously it was like if you weren't 28 years old, you weren't playing a lot for Minnesota United. So
yeah,
they really have changed the balance of the squad significantly from a veteran sort of older team to a team that has a lot of young guys now. And the funny thing about soccer is that 25 is not particularly young in soccer. In every other sport, it's, oh, this guy's still young. And 25, it's like, well, this guy is what he is, I guess, at the age of 25. But so they certainly have gotten younger. They certainly have changed the profile. And in terms of salary cap and all of those considerations and designated players, they really have given themselves all the flexibility that they might want.
Well, what's interesting too is that in MLS, and I guess probably in other facets of soccer, like getting younger doesn't necessarily mean tanking and then drafting. Like it's not a really draft reliant league. Sure, you can get young players through the super draft, you can bring players up through your academies, things like that. But like it, as opposed to like the NBA or NFL or NHL, if you're going to get younger in soccer, it doesn't mean having to basically ditch all your old guys and then draft and hope that they're good in 3 or 4 years. You can turn the roster over and get younger like they did without having to draft those players.
Yeah, they did draft a bunch of guys, but I think it's it's likely that anybody that they end up signing from that draft class is going to start with their second team, start with Minnesota United too. And so it's becoming more like baseball in that way, where you draft baseball players and it's often 3, 4, 5 years before you hear from them again. It's not quite to that level, but it's certainly not like the NFL where you have to hit on your draft picks or you're sunk. There was the Philadelphia Union traded all of their draft picks kind of forever just because they believe in their own development and their own academy, and they'll take whatever they can get for their draft picks. They just don't make them. They just won't do them. Up until last year, teams would pretty regularly pass on draft picks. You would look down the list in the third round and stuff, and you would just be pass after pass. At one point, there was a transaction. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Minnesota United traded a third round pick to Los Angeles for Cameron Dunbar. His name was Cameron Dunbar. And the funny thing about it was I went back and looked, and the Galaxy had passed on 11 straight third round picks or something like that. So it was like the Galaxy really did not care whether they got we'll take a third round pick. That'll be great. We'll definitely use that too. It was like getting handed a flyer outside a bar. Oh yeah, we're going to go. We're going to definitely do that.
That's amazing. I'm trying to imagine like a Vikings fan, like the Vikings just like, nah, we don't need a third round pick. Although, in a sense, they've kind of said that already with this year's draft because they've gotten rid of all their draft picks.
What I said was Kellen Mond, but what I meant was pass,
which is something Kellen Mond couldn't do. But anyway, kind of big picture with this offseason, Teemu Pukki is no longer. Why didn't that work out? I thought he was supposed to be pretty good. I thought he was okay for a while. Why did that never really kind of stick here?
He was pretty good for a while. He had a decent first half season. He came in midway through 2023 and started a little bit slow. I think if I remember right, he had 1 goal in his first 9 games and then 9 in his last 10 or something like that, including 4 in 1 game. So he started last season as their first choice center forward, and he just sort of gradually fell out of favor a little bit. Taniolo O'Shea was sort of a breakout player, and about partway through April, I guess it was, they sort of switched and Pukki became the guy who played the last 30 minutes rather than the first 60 minutes. And then they brought in Kelvin Yeboah in the summer, and then it went to Pukki being the guy who plays when they desperately need a goal and they're down 1 with 10 minutes to go or something like that. And I did talk to him before he departed, and it really, for him, a lot of it came down to family stuff. He had a young family. You and I both understand that, as we both have children sort of wandering around in the background right now. But his family was over in Finland. He had, right before the season started, he had his 3rd child last year, and then basically missed the first year of that kid's life because he was over here. His oldest was starting school over there, which is why his family stayed over there. And so it was just a tough year. I'm not sure there's anything more to it than it's just a tough year when you're a continent away from your family. He dealt with some injury stuff, but I don't know if you really need to dig deep into anything beyond, rough year for the guy.
So they made the postseason last year. They advanced a round against Real Salt Lake, and then we thought, hey, maybe a run is coming, but then that came crashing pretty fast to a superior LA team. What's the outlook for 2025? What do we think this team should be this year?
Well, I really do think it's interesting whether they can make that final step a little bit. If you look at the league-wide standing as a whole, which is a little tough because the league is so split between the Western and Eastern Conference now that, I mean, Minnesota will play 28 games against the West and 6 against the East this year. So it's almost to the point of like Big Ten football where you're basically just playing the Big Ten and nobody else. But I think the interesting thing will be to look and see if they can make that final step and get into the upper echelon, not only in the West, but the league as a whole. I don't think they've finished at more higher than 9th or 10th league wide so far. And if you look at the teams that were at the top of the West that finished above them, Seattle and Real Salt Lake and both LA teams, if I remember my numbers right, they played those teams 14 times last year, and if you don't count the penalty shootout wins against Real Salt Lake as wins, if you count them as draws, they had 1 win in those 14 games. And wow. So the challenge, I think, is going to be to take the core that they have in place, take the new additions that they're making, and can the continuity of that really result in another step forward in terms of getting up to being competitive with those teams? Or is it going to be, is there sort of a ceiling there where they can't get past the two LA teams or any of the other teams that are sort of retooling right now?
Only 6 games against the East, but very notably 1 against Inter Miami here. That'll be fun, right? That'll be good.
I mean, the tickets went on sale this week, and there's been a lot of sort of talk about. I don't think they're sold out yet at this point. They went on public sale. They had season ticket sale yesterday, public sale today. I checked about an hour after the public sale started, and they hadn't sold out yet. They're obviously expensive, but I would be surprised if there's any tickets left by the time May 10th rolls around. So obviously that's, going to be one of the marquee games ever in Minnesota United history. I don't think there's any question about that. The hard thing is Messi's old. He's old. They got a lot of games this summer. The Miami's playing in the Club World Cup and stuff. Will he come to Minnesota and play? Not a guarantee. Not at all a guarantee. So
that's true. That's true.
It's a rough guessing game. I can't. It would be hard if I was a fan, because obviously if you have the chance to see Lionel Messi and he's coming to your town, yeah, he's the greatest soccer player of all time. You're gonna want to buy that ticket, and the cost doesn't matter a lot. And it's just it feels to me like a big risk to go, well, I could spend $1,000 on tickets for this game, but is he going to be here? I sure hope so.
Load management takes away all your money. We would hate to see that, wouldn't we?
No, we don't want to. We don't manage. Honestly, with Messi, it's almost to the point that the league didn't quite turn him into Pele and make him play a half for every team in the league or something like that. But they'd like to. I know they would like to if they could.
I still remember going. It was the baseball road trip that you've been on many now times. Back in 2002, we were in San Francisco, and Barry Bonds didn't play, but he pinch hit in the 9th inning. It was just when he was at the peak of his powers, but he pinch hit in the 9th inning. And while it was disappointing that he didn't start, at the very least he pinch hit. So I would think any Messi sighting would be
right.
Excuse me. Any Messi sighting would be better than nothing.
I really thought that story was going to end with Pele being in a minor league baseball game. We were on the baseball road trip when we were in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
No.
And Pele was there selling
Weird
laundry
things.
Detergent.
Weird things have happened on the baseball road trip, but that was not one of them. That was a baseball story. Although the baseball road trip has taken, as we've just talked about before we started recording, a decidedly non-baseball turn lately.
Yeah. We're going to a hockey game tonight. As of recording, going to a hockey game Thursday night, and maybe afterwards, if we're lucky, we'll go see Van Halen. Increasingly poor planning out of the baseball road trip.
It is. Thanks, John.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from John, and just an important postscript to the most important part of the conversation about Van Halen. As someone who listened to a lot of Van Halen in my youth, I would say this about their various lead singers. I think David Lee Roth was a better front man than Sammy Hagar. I think Sammy Hagar is a better lead singer than David Lee Roth. And then, of course, Gary Cherone, formerly of the band Extreme, which I also listened to an embarrassing amount in my youth and teens. He just didn't fit. He was a poor fit for Van Halen. Talented guy, talented musician, just did not work out, was not the right combination. Reading Wikipedia, find that his agent, his handler, represented both bands, thought it would be a good fit. Turns out it wasn't. But yeah, John's point stands. Either a David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar is fine, but you don't want your roster to be stuck with ill-fitting players, even if they are talented. Let's finish with the cooler. Couple things here. Big things. Kevin O'Connell, not surprisingly, he'd already won some awards previously, but he wins the big one, NFL Coach of the Year at the NFL Honors program Thursday night. 14-3 this season with the Vikings team that, again, we've talked about Projections had them at 7 wins. This team overachieved any way you look at it this season, and he was a big part of that. His roster management, his game management, everything that went into it, they bought into what he was selling. They went 14-3, absolutely deserving of Coach of the Year, even if the season didn't end how fans might have wanted it to. Jared Allen, Vikings pass rushing legend, is going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He found that out as well on Thursday. So big dose of good news for the Vikings on a couple of different fronts. So congratulations to both of those guys. That is a tremendous honor for both of them. Jared Allen's been waiting for that Hall of Fame call for a while, and now he has it. Gopher women's basketball team lost to Iowa 68-60. They've dropped a few in a row now. Tough opponents. I mean, the UCLA-USC trip they just got off of, a couple of top 5 teams in the country. You don't necessarily expect they are going to win those games. But back at Williams Arena, 2 teams kind of on the precipice, on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. Gophers can't knock off Iowa. 68-60 is the final. That one hurts. I think the Gophers are still an ascending team, but they are still finding out that life is difficult when you don't have your top player, Mara Braun. A lot of people have been stepping up in her absence with the injury again, but that was probably a game where they certainly missed her even more than others. So see if they can rally and respond. Some season left, but now they have dropped in Big Ten play to 6-6, and they need to get back on the winning track soon. That will do it for me today. Plenty of good stuff coming up next week. Royce on the Super Bowl. All sorts of other stuff next week. Monitoring Wolves sale implications. We are going to find out either today or Monday who won the arbitration, who is the owner of the Wolves, or at least the process of who is the owner of the Wolves. If and when that happens, could be some plans in the works for a special podcast, so stick around for that if that happens today or some other time soon. Until then, though, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Friday. Back at it again later.